What is up, guys, and welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to be making a Flash video. This is the first time I made a Flash video in about 2 years, so let's get into this. So guys, I just recently finished rewatching The Flash seasons 1 through 9, and I'm going to go over how good I think it really was after seeing it another time. Now I'm going to start this off. Seasons 1 and 2 are obviously very good seasons, so there honestly won't be as much to talk about for them, because, they were as good as I remember them being. But I did write down a few things that I didn't exactly take into account the first few times I watched the two seasons. The first thing is that while season 1 was incredible, Iris is actually a moron. Like, she is actually so stupid. Like, I genuinely don't understand how she couldn't figure out that Barry was the Flash. I'm pretty sure the actress Candace Patton even expressed some frustration with how stupid her character was, because if you guys watch The Flash season 1, my goodness, she is an idiot. Another thing I thought about in season 1 was that Wells was revealed as the Reverse Flash a little bit too quick for me. It was episode 9 when he was revealed. I think like episode 14 or 15 of a 23 episode season is the right time to reveal a villain. That's what they did with Zoom in season 2. But I think, just him being revealed as the villain in episode 9, also him revealing that he could walk at the end of the first episode, again, a little bit too quick for me. I just didn't quite like how quick they wanted to reveal the identity of the Reverse Flash. I mean, the episode where he did reveal his identity was still a very good episode, and I do think revealing his identity that early still did work. But it kind of, you don't get as connected to the character when it's only 9 episodes in, I feel like you gotta have a few more episodes to let that marinate a little bit. But like I said, that episode where he did reveal his identity is one of the best episodes in Flash history, so while I don't exactly like how early they did it, I still wouldn't change anything about it. But in seasons 1 and 2, the use of comic book characters, specifically the rogues from the comics, is unbelievably amazing. I love watching all those different episodes with Captain Cold, the Trickster, Weather Wizard, all those different characters is so awesome to see. In season 1, Reverse Flash's master plan is amazing. The rivalry between him and Barry is also just amazing, and it's so much better than it is in later seasons. And we'll get more on that in later in the video. And then back to season 2, I always thought that season 2 had like 1 or 2 hiccups here and there. I don't remember what it was because I couldn't find any. Season 2 is amazing. Zoom is such a threatening villain. Even Iris is pretty good in season 2, I'm not going to lie. It does get a little repetitive, obviously. They did the exact same tactic with the villain pretending to be on Team Flash and then, being revealed as the big bad. But still, I think it did work for season 2 very, very well, especially because we all thought this was Jay Garrick. We all thought it was a hero, right? And then when we saw that it wasn't a hero, we're like, wait, what? So I think that definitely did work in season 2, even though it was a little bit repetitive. Now moving on to season 3, this is where we find a few things that aren't as great about the show. Now season 3 was a very dark season, which actually isn't exactly a problem for me. It's just what the darkness did to the character of the Flash, Barry Allen, that made him kind of insufferable at times, honestly. He was too depressing, and he was honestly really stupid, I'm not going to lie. First of all, I have to say, Savitar was actually a fantastic villain. A lot of people don't like to, say that he was a good villain just because season 3, wasn't as good as seasons 1 and 2. But it's just the fact that season 3 for the other characters wasn't as good as seasons 1 and 2. But I thought Savitar was really one of the bright spots of the season. And I'm not saying that season 3 was bad. Obviously, it was a very good season. But season 3, Savitar, I thought he was actually not as bad as a lot of other people think. So back to Barry being stupid in this season, the biggest thing that I'm like, all right, yeah, I know you can't like explain absolutely everything, but how do you not like, when Savitar's about to kill Iris, right? They're standing on Infantino Street, and Iris is before Savitar and about to get stabbed. Barry's just standing there saying, "Don't do this, please don't do this." What are you doing? You're a speedster. Just run at him. Like, what are you? Genuinely don't understand. You think you have a better chance of begging a murderous speedster like Savitar not to kill Iris instead of running at him with your super speed? That literally doesn't make any sense at all. And there's a bunch more other stuff like that in this season where you're just like, bro, you're a speedster. Just use your speed, But season 3 is still a great season. You had Kid Flash in the season as well. The introduction of him was great. I think Wally West is a great character. So yeah, seasons 1 and 2, I'd give like a 9.5 and a 9 out of 10 respectively. Then season 3 got maybe a 7.5, 8 out of 10. So yeah, obviously season 3 not as great as the first 2 seasons, but definitely still a great season of The Flash. Now overall in The Flash, this started in season 2, but you have all the different Welleses, Harry Wells, H.R. Wells, Nash Wells, all these different types of Wells, like Sherlock Wells as well. I love that. I love that they introduce a new Wells in every season. Tom Cavanaugh's a very gifted actor. But one character he should not have been playing is the Reverse Flash. I mean, after season 1, that is. Obviously, unless Barry's like time traveling back to season 1, then he definitely should be playing the Reverse Flash. But Thawne comes back in the form of Wells in season 4, and their explanation of why he's, first of all, their explanation of why he's back is just time travel is responsible, and that's it. And also, his excuse for being in the Wells version of Reverse Flash again is just because he wanted to wear the face again. That doesn't really make a lot of sense. I'm pretty sure they just wanted to bring back Tom Cavanaugh as the actor for Reverse Flash, and honestly, that doesn't make any sense to me. I think they should have always had Matt Letcher play the Reverse Flash because he's the original face of the Reverse Flash, so him being brought back to life in the form of a different face, it just doesn't make any sense, and it just makes the entire timeline more confusing. That's the mistake that the Flash writers made about Reverse Flash, is they made his timeline way too confusing. After season 3, it was, not as confusing, but then when he finally came back in season 4 in the Crisis on Earth X crossover, they started to make it just way too confusing. But anyways, moving on to some of season 4, Iris is really annoying in season 4, I'm not gonna lie. She's the team leader for some reason. I don't know why they ever did that to her storyline. Obviously, she's, a journalist in the comics, and she's a journalist on every other season of the show, except season 4, where she becomes team leader, and guess what? That's her worst season. So, yeah, that was not a very smart move. Now, the Thinker I thought was a very, very good villain. He had a great design, and he actually was decently threatening in the first 9 episodes or so. But then, this body swapping storyline where he had to swap different bodies, I don't think it was, a bad storyline. I think it was definitely necessary to his master plan, but it just shouldn't have lasted so long. It lasted like 7 episodes where the original actor for the Thinker was not there, which is kind of ridiculous to me. Obviously, he had one of the best episodes of all time in this season, Enter Flash Time. That was such a great episode. You also had Barry's prison storyline. Season 4 was definitely a lot better than I thought. But they just, if only the Thinker swapping bodies lasted like maybe 2 episodes. He would swap like multiple bodies in one episode. That would have made the season a lot better, in my opinion. And we can't forget Barry's suit in this season. It was incredible. It might be the best suit we've ever seen. Obviously, the later seasons, the seasons 6 through, and actually seasons 8 and 9 probably had the best suit because of the gold boots. But season 4 suit's definitely one to remember. In conclusion, I'd actually give season 4 probably about a 7 out of 10. It was actually really good. The characters were great. And yeah, honestly, underrated season. My big thing, like I said, was just the Thinker body swapping stuff just took way too long. Now, moving on to season 5, the first thing I think of is Nora West Allen. And the thing that makes me the most upset about her is she didn't literally need to act like a child in order to be Barry and Iris's daughter from the future. She's like 25 or something in the season, acting like she's 10 years old. It's kind of ridiculous. After episode 2 of season 5, episodes 3 through 7 or so are kind of a drag to get through. They're kind of uneventful and just not there. This is like the first stretch of episodes that just really aren't that good. But then, of course, the 100th episode comes along in episode 8, and it's just incredible. But the first 2 episodes of season 5, we have Cicada. We see some scenes of Cicada where he's killing metahumans. Cicada would have been such a great villain. They missed such a great opportunity with Cicada. Obviously, they failed miserably with the Cicada they had on season 5. They still could have had the whole Reverse Flash storyline in the background, which carried season 5, by the way. And also still had a real threatening Cicada, They could have had, like, the actual David Hirsch be Cicada. I think that would have been great. Because a threatening villain like Cicada being on The Flash would just be incredible. Because you know what happens when you have a villain that doesn't have super speed that is a super threatening villain, such as Bloodwork, They're a very great character, and honestly, if they just had a more threatening Cicada, I think it could have been one of the best villains on the show. They definitely missed a huge opportunity with Cicada in season 5. But obviously, I love the storyline of Reverse Flash in the back, basically orchestrating absolutely everything behind the scenes from a prison cell. That is absolutely insane. And I really do, despite what I said before about Tom Cavanaugh, I don't like him playing the Reverse Flash. I really love his performance in this season as Reverse Flash. Reverse Flash's master plan in season 5 might honestly be better than his season 1 master plan. I was blown away the first time I watched it. Obviously, the season 5 suit really sucks. But honestly, guys, I like season 5 a lot more than a lot of you do, I'm sure. And I would still give it a 7 out of 10. Reverse Flash's storyline, I think, is incredible in this season. Sherlock Wells is a great character as well. The episode where he reveals to Team Flash that Nora's been working with the Reverse Flash, that was such a great scene. So yeah, the first 5 seasons of The Flash, obviously I knew seasons 1 and 2 were going to be good. Season 3 was a lot better than I thought it was going to be. Season 4 and 5, exactly the same way, except those that few episodes stretch early in season 5, I did not like that at all. But then we move on to season 6, and I'm just going to say it right now, Bloodwork should have been the main villain for the entire season. He was so good. That is such a missed opportunity because they found a gem with Bloodwork, and it's a shame we only got 6 episodes of him being the villain plus 1 episode later in season 9. That exact Bloodwork storyline in season 6 to start off season 6 leading up to Crisis on Infinite Earths, all of that stretched out into one entire season could have been so amazing. It's a shame we didn't get much with Bloodwork on the show because like I keep saying, he was such a great villain, such a scary villain, such a threatening villain with his ability to basically make you hallucinate and fall into a coma. That episode, by the way, it's one of the best episodes in Flash history. Now, with that said, the second half of season 6, after Bloodwork and after Crisis on Infinite Earths, which, by the way, is still my favorite crossover in the Arrowverse, I really did like it, even though I do wish they did actually have Barry vanish in Crisis, but just go to the Speed Force, just like what happened in the comics. I think that would have been a really cool callback, but then he comes out like 1 episode later or something like that. I think that would have just at least something like that, not just have Earth 90 Flash sacrifice himself instead. All that build up to Barry just doing nothing kind of just felt like a punch in the face, I'm not gonna lie. But like I was saying, after Crisis on Infinite Earths into the second half of the Flash season 6, there was still a lot of great things going on. There was a Reverse Flash storyline at some point, a Godspeed episode, a Grodd episode, and the Mirror Monarch stuff. It was actually a lot more interesting than I remember it being. So season 6 is still my 3rd favorite season of The Flash. And I would give it a 7.5 out of 10, honestly. The Flash, the first 6 seasons, surprisingly consistent. I'm not going to lie. Very consistent. There's obviously a couple filler episodes in season 6 that aren't that great. However, Barry, the Flash is in it, Barry's in it, whereas, later in seasons 8 and 9, there's some episodes that are filler episodes where Barry's just not even in it. We didn't see anything like that in seasons 1 through 6, really, where Barry just wasn't in it. So yeah, like I said, seasons 1 through 6, surprisingly consistent. However, season 6 is where a couple of things start to go downhill. Not necessarily in the season, but they present a foundation that leads to the Flash's downfall, and that, of course, is the introduction of some new characters, that being Chester and Allegra. So first of all, the only reason Allegra is in the show is because Eric Wallace, the showrunner who took over in season 6, created the character. And if you've seen the later seasons of The Flash, Allegra is an awful character. Now, I actually don't really have a problem with Chester being on the show. It's just in season 6, he didn't really have anything to do. However, the reason I don't really have a problem with him being on the show is because Cisco's actor was going to leave at some point. So I was fine with Chester being the replacement for him. Unpopular opinion, as long as Chester's not around Allegra, I think he's a fine character. But yeah, honestly, in season 6, Chester and Allegra's roles were pretty minimized and they weren't really that big of a problem. So that's why season 6 is still a winner for me. Now, season 7 is where it starts to go downhill a little bit. First of all, they never should have fired Ralph's actor at all. Obviously, those tweets Hartley Sawyer made they were pretty horrible. I'm not gonna lie, they were very bad tweets. But that they're just kind of contradicting themselves with firing him, because obviously Ralph's character was about going from being a douchebag to being a better person, right? And that's what Hartley Sawyer was likely doing himself, so they didn't even give him a chance to be a better person. So I think that was an unfair firing, and him being fired, Ralph's character no longer being on the show, kind of tanked it starting in season 7, because obviously they likely had to scrap an entire storyline with that. Now, the first few episodes of season 7 really weren't too bad. Obviously, that was just finishing off the Mirror Monarch storyline. You had the episode with Barry's speed thinking ability. That was really cool, where he basically turned against his own team and they had to fight him. I thought that was a really good episode. Barry getting his speed back in the artificial Speed Force, as obviously the Speed Force was dying in season 6. That was another great storyline, in my opinion. Then you had an episode with Abracadabra's return. I thought that was pretty cool. And then episode 5, Psych, He would have been a great villain, I'm not going to lie. But of course, they didn't make him a villain. They made him a part of the worst, probably the worst storyline in the entirety of the show, and that is the Forces storyline. The Forces storyline is the first thing about the show that I would truly consider to be horrible. Obviously, the worst thing about it is the Forces just keep calling Barry and Iris their parents. I don't understand that at all. I'll explain later in the video what I think they should have done with Season 7 instead of the Forces storyline, because I think you guys are really going to like that. But I also want to say Speed Force Nora makes absolutely no sense to be the villain. First of all, she's literally the Speed Force, so shouldn't that mean that any speedster connected to the Speed Force she would, like, have control over? Yet Barry and Team Flash, like, defeat her? I don't understand that. But yeah, the Forces storyline wasn't good in the comics, so I don't know why they think it would be good on the show. It was a horrible decision to begin with. Now, also in Season 7, you had the whole Killer Frost on trial storyline. And in my opinion, they did this multiple times in the show, especially in the later seasons. They missed a huge opportunity to turn Frost back into Killer Frost. If you guys have been watching me for years, you know I have been preaching that they should be doing that this entire time. Like, since Season 7, I have been constantly saying they should be turning Frost back into Killer Frost. Because Frost is honestly a stupid character, I'm not going to lie. She was such a cool villain when she was first introduced in Season 3, but ever since she became like a good guy, she was kind of cringe, I'm not going to lie. And I believe there were multiple opportunities where she should have turned back into Killer Frost in the show, this one being the first opportunity, and they just missed that by a lot. Now, after the Forces storyline, we have Cisco's farewell episode, and it starts off with Barry and Caitlin, like, not even caring that Cisco was, like, leaving, which makes no sense and honestly didn't do anything but piss me off, I'm not gonna lie. And also in Season 7, the middle of Season 7, this is where the filler episodes without Barry in them started. These quite literally don't even need to be watched. You can skip them. Like, I'm not even joking. Now, we have the Godspeed storyline after this, and while it was a little better than the rest of Season 7, it still was very disappointing. Godspeed isn't actually the villain until, like, the second half of the final episode of Season 7. Now, they missed such a big opportunity with Godspeed. He could have been such a cool season-long villain. The Forces literally should have just been deleted out of the show, and Godspeed should have been the main villain for the entirety of Season 7. Now, what could have happened here is obviously August Hart in the comics. I believe he's a detective, and he's actually not from the future in the comics. He's from the present, and actually becomes friends with Barry at CCPD. And then somehow, some way, I can't exactly remember how the comic goes, but August Hart gets speed, and then I think he wants other speedsters' speed. Is that kind of what he does in the comics? I'm pretty sure that's what he does in the comics. He, like, tries to steal other speedsters' speed, which I guess the show did get that right. He was trying to steal Barry's speed the whole time. But yeah, there could have been such a cool season-long storyline. Like, we see maybe because of Crisis on Infinite Earths, that changes August Hart to be from the present instead of the future. And then we see, him be introduced at CCPD. He becomes friends with Barry. They go on, they do different CCPD stuff together. Then one day he gets speed somehow, and then ends up becoming a villain, and Barry has to fight his friend. That could have been that would have been a much better storyline. The graphic novel approach Eric Wallace took was just an absolute fail, because a season-long Godspeed storyline would have been amazing, and honestly, we should have gotten that instead of anything else in Season 7. So Season 7, I would give a solid 4.5, 4 out of 10, something like that. Not very good at all. Then we get into Season 8, which is definitely better than Season 7. Armageddon started off, it was really good. Besides, in Episode 4, the Why Don't You Love BS storyline, which is also what started the entire, Chester and Allegra BS. Also in the Armageddon storyline, they had the most random characters on Team Flash, like Alex Danvers is on Team Flash for some reason. But yeah, the rest of Armageddon was great. You had so many returning characters. You had Ray Palmer, Black Lightning, as well as the Hall of Justice. That was really cool to see again. Barry becoming the Reverse Flash and Thawne becoming the Flash, I thought was really cool. So yeah, for the most part, Armageddon was cool. Despero was a great villain. But one thing I do have to say is, starting in Episode 5, Reverse Flash's suit, It looks so stupid, but it would have been a huge upgrade if they made him vibrate and his eyes glow red just like he used to. That suit would have actually probably looked better than the other one. So yeah, I'd say overall Armageddon was a solid 7 out of 10, something like that. It was definitely pretty good. But then moving on to the rest of season 8, this is where we also see Cecile just reading everyone's emotions instead of having scenes where the character actually lets their emotions loose. It's just such lazy writing, and Cecile, this is where she starts to become a truly horrible character. Also, they just changed her powers in this season for no reason. Like, back in season 4 when she first got her powers, she could just read minds, but then in season 8 they clarify that she can't read minds, but she's only an empath. Okay. Now, with that said, the reason season 8 is so much better than season 7 is, well, one, better storylines, but also I actually enjoyed the filler episodes in season 8. It's probably because Barry was actually in them. Now, another thing I'll say is Joe had absolutely zero role in the show after season 7, even though he actually did have a somewhat interesting storyline in season 7 after quitting CCPD when he was, I guess, on that investigation with Kramer. But in seasons 8 and 9, there was nothing for him to do. Like, there was absolutely no reason for him to be on the show. So I think he could have, maybe went back to CCPD or something like that, because that was really his role in the show, was being the cop, being, I guess, Barry's father figure. But even in the later seasons, he just stopped being that too. So yeah, that was another really weird thing about season 8, is he was just kind of existing for no reason. But then you get to the middle of season 8 and the Deathstorm storyline was actually so much better than I remember. But one thing I will say is the show really likes to traumatize Caitlyn for some reason with, the whole Ronnie situation, then Frost's death, and then later when Barry destroys Caitlyn's attempt to try and bring Frost back from the dead. Why? Like, she never even gets like a happy ending either. They just kind of hate her. I'm not gonna lie. Yeah, Deathstorm was still a really cool villain though. I think he was defeated a little bit too quick, but I still think he was a cool character. But after Frost sacrificed herself to defeat Deathstorm, they did not need to dedicate an entire episode to how each member of Team Flash was dealing with Frost's death. I would understand if I would understand that if like Caitlyn died or something, if each of the members of Team Flash had to kind of process that, but honestly, Frost wasn't really that great of a character, so I don't know why everyone in Team Flash was taking it so hard, and I don't know why Eric Wallace thought the audience needed to see that as well. It's kind of just a pointless episode. But then we get to later in season 8, and they missed a huge opportunity when they brought back the Flashpoint original Thawne. Obviously, he didn't have his memories back, so he was a hero, right? He was Mina Dowlin's boyfriend. But here's what I think should have happened. Obviously, he could have stayed a hero for episodes 18 and 19, but then when Mina's able to share her powers with Eobard to give him speed, that's when he should have accidentally connected to the negative Speed Force, and that's when he should have gotten his memories back. That would have been an insanely cool scene. He finally remembers like how much he hates the Flash. He remembers that he's the Reverse Flash, all this stuff. Oh my goodness, that would have been such a great scene. They missed an opportunity there for sure. But basically the negative forces were kind of the main villain of the last storyline of season 8. But one of the funniest things is Allegra, Cecile, and Chester actually tried to like go up against all three forces of nature, and they almost won. Eric Wallace, what are we doing, bro? Like, these are forces of nature. That's like me trying to like fight gravity or something, and I like almost win. That's absurd.
What is this, the B team? You gotta be kidding me.
Yeah, they made this last arc very confusing. This negative Speed Force Avatar BS just makes absolutely no sense. The Reverse Flash quite literally created the negative Speed Force, but in season 8, they say he's only the Avatar and only tapped into the negative Speed Force. That's all of that kind of cancels out like the entire artificial Speed Force storyline from late season 6 and early season 7. Team Flash only made an artificial Speed Force when they got the idea from how Thawne created his own Speed Force. So they're essentially canceling out an entire storyline from their own show. Only Eric Wallace could do that. But yeah, instead of bringing back the Matt Letcher version of Reverse Flash, they end up killing him off and bringing back the Wells version of Reverse Flash with all the different negative forces inside of him. And they, for some reason, make him wear this black suit, which just looks... I mean, the suit itself isn't horrible, but the cowl just looks ridiculous. Also, there's just no point in him wearing that suit or having all the powers of the negative forces. A simple speedster battle between Barry and Thawne would have been much better than whatever the heck this crap was. So yeah, season 8 did not end off on the best note. I would still give it about a 6 out of 10 though, definitely better than season 7. Now getting into season 9, Joe leaving Central City just because the actor wasn't going to be a series regular anymore made no sense at all. I mean, just say he was visiting Wally or something like that. You know, like you don't have to go to these lengths to say he's like leaving Central City. That doesn't make any sense. All right, and here we go, guys. At the end of season 8, Caitlin went into this like chamber to try and bring Frost back, and they ended up introducing the character Keone instead, who comes out of this chamber. This was such a missed opportunity. They should have either had just bring Caitlin back and say that the experiment didn't work, or B, have the machine bring both Caitlin and Frost back, but instead of Frost, we get Killer Frost, and she's in control, I think that would have been such a cool way to do things instead. So it would have been like, Team Flash is, they're faced with season 3 all over again with Killer Frost controlling the body of Caitlin. I think that would have been such a cool storyline and such a missed opportunity for a secondary main villain of the first half of season 9. Also, Team Flash just didn't care that Caitlin was dead. Barry cared just a little bit, but no one else seemed to care. It's probably because the characters suck. And also, I didn't mention this, but back in season 7 they introduced Mark, aka Chillblaine. He could have been used as another Captain Cold type villain. I think he would have actually been a pretty cool character if he was actually something like that, But instead they just use him as Frost's love interest, and then he becomes a season regular in season 9 and kind of turned into a villain for a little bit during the Red Death storyline, which was kind of cool, but not for long. And his outfit just looks ridiculous, bro. But he could have been a pretty cool, recurring villain, he appears every 10 episodes or so, just sort of like how Captain Cold was in the earlier seasons. Now, the Red Death storyline in the first 5 episodes of season 9, it was a huge fail. They shouldn't have used Batwoman from Another Earth. They could have put their own twist on it, saying maybe Bloodwork was chosen as the next negative Speed Force avatar, and became the Red Death. Obviously, I'm not a fan of this whole Avatar BS, but by their standards, that's something they could have done. Or it could have just been simple as Bloodwork connected to the negative Speed Force and became a speedster. I think that would be a much better way to put it, to just delete all this Avatar BS out of the show. So yeah, Bloodwork could have been the Red Death. I think that would have been really cool. And then later in season 9 with Cobalt Blue, I think him being a villain should have been the doing of Reverse Flash. I'll explain more about that later in the video, but I do have to continue talking about the Red Death because Ryan Wilder's actress for the Red Death was absolutely awful. I'm just look at this.
Crushed by the Flash again! We will bring the war to hell!
Maybe if she kept the mask on at all times, she would have been a little bit better of a villain, but overall, Red Death was a huge miss. Something else that they could have done is had Oliver Queen from Another Earth or something be Red Death. Or they do actually have a Bruce Wayne actor in the Arrowverse. They could have used him as the Red Death. I think that would have been really cool. Season 9, Episode 6 should just be deleted from the show. We're not even going to talk about that one. Same with Season 9, Episode 7. A little bit of a better episode because Barry's in it a little bit more. But it added absolutely nothing to the show. It was an entire episode dedicated to a Supergirl character, that being Dreamer. No purpose in it being in the show. Should have just been deleted. Now, episodes 9 and 10 of season 9, that's what happens when you focus on the right characters and the storylines that actually matter. Honestly, for me, season 9 is only 2 episodes long. Episodes 9 and 10. Obviously, episode 9, you had Green Arrow's return, you had Kid Flash come back, you had Diggle, you had Bloodwork. Such a great episode. Absolutely amazing. And guess what? They actually used characters people cared about, and people liked the episode. It's almost like that's how it works, I don't know why Eric Wallace couldn't pick up on that. And then, of course, episode 10 is where it comes full circle. They didn't do it exactly how I wanted them to, but I think it was still done very well. It was so refreshing seeing Matt Letcher play the Reverse Flash, and he's actually a villain. I love that. But then you get into later in season 9 with the Cobalt Blue storyline. Barry's just not in the third to last episode for the most part until like the last 8 minutes of the episode. That's just absolute insanity. That episode also sucked, by the way. And I will say this, I have never skipped through more scenes than I did in season 9. Despite there being 2 of the best episodes of all time in this season, I can now say for certain that season 9 is my least favorite and in my opinion the worst season of The Flash. Also, Keone herself is a horrible character, but then she says that she's a goddess.
I'm a goddess.
Which doesn't make any sense. Like, all right, bro, we just created a divine entity in a lab. Like, I genuinely don't understand that. Plus, there's only one god, and I'm pretty sure it's not Keone. Now we get to episode 12, and it's so weird. This might be the weirdest episode of the entire show. I don't remember it being like this, but wow, what a horrible and weird episode. Specifically, you got things like Eddie seeing what his daughter could have looked like. It's just Jessica Parker Kennedy with a blonde wig. It's just so weird. And I'm not even going to talk much about the finale, episode 13 of season 9. I made a whole 30-minute video talking about it when that episode first came out, so you guys can go check that out. But yeah, another terrible episode. So one thing I do want to point out is that they made Reverse Flash stop vibrating and they made him stop having red eyes for some reason. And also when Zoom came back at the finale, they stopped like the look of like the blue lightning crackling around him. The thing is, I can literally make Reverse Flash vibrate and Zoom's blue lightning come back with some simple editing software on my computer. So they could have easily done it in the later seasons. The only excuse they have is that they simply just didn't want to, or they thought it looked better like this. I don't know how they could possibly think that. Eddie as Cobalt Blue could have been such a cool villain. What I think should happen is Reverse Flash should have been responsible for his return, not the negative Speed Force. I think that doesn't make any sense. Like I said, the forces shouldn't have even existed. It should just be the normal Speed Force and Thawne's artificial negative Speed Force. And that's it, you know? But I think what could have happened is, obviously Reverse Flash was brought back to life. I don't know why he wouldn't time travel and, save Eddie's life or something like that. So I think he could do that, maybe connect Eddie to the negative Speed Force, and turn him into a villain. I think that would have been so cool. That would have been like a way to get at Team Flash is, obviously Eddie has the perfect motivation to be a villain. Barry stole Iris from him after he sacrificed himself. I think that it's a perfect motivation. So I think if Reverse Flash picked up on that and time traveled and saved Eddie's life, obviously that would also keep Reverse Flash's existence and actually have it make sense of why he's alive. But yeah, Eddie could have been such a cool villain as Cobalt Blue, but they failed miserably. Now more about Reverse Flash and his arc over the show. In season 1, he was incredible, and I understand that they're being comic book accurate in the later seasons by saying that his life's work is to kill the Flash and he hates nothing more than the Flash. But I personally love the calm and smart version of Reverse Flash who humbly hated the Flash, not the one who screams of insanity that he hates the Flash. Like, for example, here's a clip of Thawne in season 8.
I will never be replaced because no speedster is ever gonna feel for you what I do. Hate, 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 hate.
It's kind of cringe, right? He's just like screaming that he hates the Flash, and that's it. But then here we have him in season 1.
No trace of the man you will be one day, for whom I have nothing but hate. And to be clear, nothing is forgiven. There will be a reckoning. I promise you, Mary Ellen, and you will die.
Like, isn't that so much better? Like, you can see he's patient, but he keeps all that hate inside of him and uses it when he's actually fighting the Flash. He doesn't just like yell at him like an idiot. And also another thing I will say about the Reverse Flash, I have said this before, but in the later seasons, like I said, I know it's comic book accurate, but Thawne is such a needy, stupid, and just overall just insufferable villain, whereas in the earlier seasons they actually take advantage of his intellect. He's a scientist from the future, yet they make him act like an absolute moron in later seasons. And like I said, I love the calm version of Reverse Flash, which obviously, like I said, is a change from the comics, but Sometimes I prefer changes from the comics, such as like Zoom's suit as well. He has a yellow suit in the comics, but obviously on the show, he looks a lot better in that black suit. And also, I mentioned this with Godspeed, but why did Eric Wallace always only let Team Flash discover the villain at like the second to last episode of the storyline? I don't understand that. It makes no sense. Now, like I said before, the show is surprisingly consistent through the first 6 seasons. The only big inconsistency is Barry seemed to like forget how to use his powers sometimes. Like he would forget that he's a speedster at some points. It just like doesn't make any sense. Like at some points, like Barry just like stops to talk to the villain instead of like just using his super speed to put the villain in cuffs. I don't understand. Also, something I did notice is Eric Wallace would emphasize like really specific things for some reason. Like apparently in like seasons 8 and 9, Korber is like the only other cop that exists in the entire precinct besides Barry and Kramer. I don't know why. Or like this O'Shaughnessy's bar is apparently the only bar that ever existed in Central City. Because every bar scene was at this bar. Even the one when Barry and Thawne time traveled back to 2000, it was they're like when they got a drink was at O'Shaughnessy's bar still. I don't know why this is the only bar that exists. Now, I will give Eric Wallace this. I think he had a decent vision in terms of what he wanted the show to turn into. I don't know if this is going to make any sense to you guys, but the first 5 seasons of the show, it really felt like they were making a TV show, but when Eric Wallace took over, it felt like they were making a comic book show, if that makes sense. They're both good, and the idea of making a comic book show is obviously great, but Eric Wallace was an utter disaster to the show. It could have been great if he focused on the right storylines and focused on the right characters, but he didn't, obviously. So overall, I really wish they kept the original showrunners that they had for seasons 1 through 5. They most definitely would have done things in a way that makes more sense, and the supporting cast for the later seasons most likely would have been much better. They probably would have brought in like an actual comic book character instead of a character like Allegra, who was created by Eric Wallace and was awful. And with the supporting cast, Cecile, Chester, Allegra, all awful characters. They were all awful characters, and they were made to be like the main characters. Like in season 9, Cecile had a season-long storyline, Barry didn't. That is absolutely insane. I don't know what Eric Wallace's obsession is with Chester, Allegra, and Cecile, but they're awful. They're just awful characters. And with the supporting cast, take like a show like Smallville, for example. Instead of adding a bunch of useless characters with useless storylines in the later seasons, they just overall simply had less characters, you know? Like they lost Lana Lang, they lost Jonathan Kent, they lost Lex Luthor, but they didn't add any characters, I mean, besides like Lois Lane, to like replace them like immediately, you know? They just simply had less characters, and that's what The Flash should have done. They did add a few characters in Smallville, obviously, but those are like significant comic book characters, like Oliver Queen, you know? So yeah, I think The Flash should have either just had less characters, they could have had it be Barry, Iris, Joe, Caitlin, and then every once in a while, Timeless Wells. If Cisco were to make a return, something like that. And, you know, if Cisco wasn't going to be on the show, then a character I think like Chester's fine. But just having so many storylines of Allegra and Cecile in the later seasons just made no sense to me. Or the other option that I was going to say is that they could have just added some more like comic book characters, or just had like characters that have been on the show in the past, like be season regulars, like a character like Jay Garrick, you know? But I think where The Flash really fails in the later seasons is the storylines and the supporting cast and their emphasis on the supporting cast, which was horrible. So yeah, the only full-out W I would actually give to Eric Wallace is the Bloodwork storyline, although I wish it had lasted much longer, like I said. And obviously I would also give him a W for episode 9 and 10 of season 9. But overall, Eric Wallace kind of ruined the show. The first 6 seasons, though, I thought were very consistent, surprisingly. But yeah, other than that, The Flash, obviously one of my favorite shows ever. It had its ups and downs, and I really hope Grant Gustin does make a return as The Flash sometime in the DCU. Maybe even be casted as The Flash in the DCU. But yeah, other than that, let me know you guys' thoughts on the show in the comments below. This is my first time making a Flash video in a couple of years, so this is kind of surreal. But other than that, guys, yeah, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.